Hey, thanks for listening to the Udrcast. If you appreciate kind of in-depth conversation and insight into recovery, make sure to sign up as a member. Most of our members pitch in $5 or $10 a month, the price of a few coffees. To make this happen, you can sign up at the website at Billwardlife.
The Udrcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the Udrcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The Udrcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the Udrcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Okay, welcome to another edition of the Udrcast. I'm Bill Ward. I'm your host, coming to you live from the recovery capital of Canada. Today I got a real special guest. He's been a friend of mine. I sponsored him years ago, and he's just kicking ass and taking names these days, and his name is Regan H. Welcome, Regs. Good to have you here, bro.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I appreciate you. I appreciate you asked me to do this, and I think a part of me, we talk about recovery and not being resentful. And I was like, for years, I'm like, wonder when Bill's gonna ask me to do this fucking podcast. You know what I mean? Like, and I just kind of just laid low and was like, he'll ask me eventually, right? So I appreciate you having me, man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you do for everyone.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. So yeah, bro, I'm just like I said, glad to have you here and get to hear your story. And I know many parts of your story, but in the last few years, you've grown so much that I don't know a lot of like your story and the growth of your new life and shit, right? And so that I'm really interested into, and I know the listeners really like the old part, the drug log part, but I really like the new part. What's life like now? And you've really come a long way, right? We were talking before the episode, and you're just kind of fucking living your best life, eh?
We talked about this before we started this thing, and talking about how we live our best lives these days, and it was like, and sometimes it's just surreal. You mean I remember sitting on my deck a few weeks ago, and just looking out at the sky, and I'm like, how the fuck did I end up here? You know what I mean? And it's like, I would have never thought I would have ended up where I am now. 5, 6, 7 years ago. I mean, it's just, I owe everything to recovery. I mean, a big part of this is the work that I put in this 12-step thing, and not really understanding what it was at the beginning, and failing and having a little bit of success, a little bit of failure, and some hard fucking lessons over the years. You know what I mean? And I think that, you kind of see me walk that journey, and see me stumble and fall and make fucking mistakes like we've seen it, like now I've seen other people do. You know what I mean? And I just never knew that what was waiting for me. So,
and that's why I think I have so much respect for you, is because I know how hard it is, and I know that I've seen you slip, and I've seen you fall, and I've seen you almost not make it back, and then you came back, and like with a totally different attitude to dig in and to do the things you needed to do. And as a result, you're living your best life today, right? And, we were chatting earlier, you just bought your first, house, apartment, of your own that you've ever owned? Work's going great. You just traveled to, where'd you go?
Portugal.
Portugal for your best friend's wedding, and just like these gifts, right? And we owe it all to the process and to the creator that we ended up finding. And yeah, man, I just have a lot of respect for your stick to itiveness and you're fucking digging in real hard. And so let's get into this. I guess I want to say one thing before we get going. So the reason I started this podcast years ago was so I was able to maybe inspire somebody to help them want to change. And we both know that putting down the drink and putting down the substance it's a big part of it, but it's in some ways it's the smallest part of it. And if we don't change, if we don't do the heavy work, if we don't go through the pain and do the things we need to do, we probably will pick up again, right? So I just want to kind of reiterate that this podcast is to really try to inspire people to want to make those changes and learn what recovery really is. To me, it's really recovering from the spiritual malady. Would you not agree?
I would agree that, I would agree to that now. You know what I mean? Like you would ask me 5 years ago that if I was, like if I was recovering from a spiritual sickness, I would have probably told you to get fucked. Right. And it's like, what I didn't know then, what I know now, everything that anyone ever told me back then, like when we're talking 2018-ish, my first really shot at recovery, you know what I mean? And not knowing what I needed to recover from was the problem, right? So I would 100% agree now that, you mentioned that, like the substance is such a small part. It's the fucking tip of the iceberg, you know what I mean? The real problem is fucking Regan, you know what I mean? And it's like, until I uncover what's going on with Regan and what makes him tick and what makes him drive and where that takes me, I was bound to fail. Right. And it's like putting the drink down is just like, is very much the easiest part of this. Right. I think for me it was, right. Like I could go to detox and put the substance down, but I was always still there, and now I get to spread that message of, of what people need to recover from. And if you don't catch on to that, you're in big trouble. So,
fuck yeah. And on that note, let's kind of take it back, bro. Let's take it back to the beginning. Like, let's go through your story a bit. Tell the listeners like where you came from. Like, what did your childhood look like? And, give us some backstory.
Sure. Like I say, I grew up in a pretty stable, family for all respects. You mean like, I have an older brother that is now pretty successful, and obviously went through obviously went through the typical childhood things. I think that lots of people can relate to divorce, to your parents splitting up, and not really knowing how much that affected me till later in my life, and it was like, it turned out to be a big deal, right? And not to none of that was my fault, right? And like I think a part of me back then thought that it was my fault, but I through the high school years, I always like now I see this stuff in meetings. I remember when I first started going there, it was like, oh, here's never fit in. I never fit in over here. I didn't fit in with this guy, and I was like, who the fuck are these people, right? And then and the more I got into this program, I'm like, fuck, that's me. I never fit in with anyone. I bounced from crowd to crowd. You know what I mean? Then I finally found the people that accepted me, right? Like most of us do. And the drugs and alcohol started, right? Where I fucking felt at home. These people accepted me.
So when you were growing up, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in lovely Sydney, British Columbia.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And when you were like in elementary, do you remember any sign of disconnect there? When you look back now,
I look back. So here's a tad story that I don't think I share very often or at all, pretty much. But when I was in like kindergarten, grade 1, like I had like I had gotten held back because I had like this eye surgery when I was And I just remember this right now. Like when I got held back. So like in the very beginning of my elementary school, like my first year, I was like, half the day I was in kindergarten, half the day I was in grade 1. So it was already split up. You know what I mean? Like had friends in this grade, people bugging me why I got held back, like, or you're stupid or this or that, the other thing. And I was like, I was just blowing my mind right now because it's the first time I've ever talked about this.
Mm.
Right. And like, as a very young child, I can't believe I'm talking about this right now. I was like, from the very start, I was disconnected. Right.
Mm.
I never, I was split between this, that, and the other thing and never really fit in ever. So,
Mm.
you know,
Did your mom and your dad give you like a lot of nurturing and explain things to you in life? And did they give you like a lot of love, or was it they were loving but from a distance, or what?
so here's the thing. So, like my mom, God bless her, loved me to death. Loved me. She was the typical, mom. You know what I mean? My dad, on the other hand, all males in my family are very robotic, right? My dad has not told me he loved me. I can't remember once in my whole life that he's told me he loved me. Do I think he loves me? Of course I do. Do I know he does? Of course he does. What he shows is love, right? But like the words have never come out of his mouth. You mean like I'm a lot of my mom, right? Like I'm sensitive, I'm emotional. You mean, and I look at my brother, and he's a lot like my dad. They're both like robots. They don't understand. If something's fucking your life up, you just stop doing that, right? And when I was going through, through the whirlwind of addiction, you know what I mean? My mom kind of understood, right? Because she had a gambling problem when we were growing up, and we can talk more about that in a minute, right? And that was a big shit storm, right? But like people that don't understand addiction, people that don't understand um the mental obsession and the allergy and stuff like that. Well, and it's not my responsibility to explain that to them because they'll never understand, right? But like they're very hardline guys. My dad and my brother, you know what I mean? Like they put up boundaries and they hold their boundaries even if they think they're wrong. Or even if I think they're wrong or whatever the case may be, right? But like my mom, like was a very nurturing, loving, caring woman, right? She had her own demons, right? But like, like never, we talk about the spiritual disease or whatever. I think every human on this planet suffers from that. To what extent? Some very little, some very extreme, right?
Agreed. Brothers, sisters?
One brother, older brother, right?
How much older?
3 years, right? So like growing up, my brother ruined a lot of things for me, Bill, right? I never got a fucking car because he fucking ruined that for me, right? I say that now, but like I think, like my brother was a test subject for all these things that, my parents were laying out for him, right? So if he screwed them up, I never got them. Well, your brother screwed that up for you, right? And it's like, God, like I love my brother. Do we have the best relationship today? Not really, right? We're cut from two different cloths, I think. But I think that relationship's coming back, so.
Okay, kind of rewinding, you had touched base on maybe your mom's gambling. What?
Sure.
Expand on that.
Sure, I can touch base on that. It is, so here's where it is, okay? This is where I had a huge resentment against my mom over the years, okay? And it looked a lot like this. So my parents got divorced when I was about 10, 12, 13, in that early teen areas, okay? And never really knew why, right? I think that they hid a lot of that stuff. They didn't want us to see it, right? And I seen the relationship deteriorating. Like I'm not, like I'm not fucking stupid, you know what I mean? Like, and funny story, and not even really a funny story. It was kind of, now I look back at it, kind of terrible, right? Like, so my mom worked for this company for 20 plus years, okay? And the owner had a daughter that I went to high school with. She was a couple years younger than me, and And my mom had lost her job, and I never knew why, right? I thought it was because of the divorce, they were having trouble or whatever like that. So I was at this party one night, and this girl's like, "Hey," she's like, "Oh, she's like, we're really sorry about your mom." I'm like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "Yeah, my dad had to fire her. She stole this money." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Right? Like, what are you talking about? Right? So long story short, what had happened is that my parents used to build houses. That's what they used to do. They used to build a house, live in it, then they'd build another house, live in it. So they had a big account that had this business fund in it. They had hundreds of thousands of dollars in it, right? So we hadn't to build a house. We hadn't built a house in a few years, and my dad had never checked the account for this money, so we went and checked his account, and all the fucking money's gone, right? So I guess she had gambled away all the money, right? Which in turn was a big part of their divorce, and they're not knowing that kind of stuff, right? So this just shows you what kind of guy my dad is, right? And I think I have a lot of my dad's attributes when it comes to this kind of stuff. So he'd found out she'd spent all this money, and I heard this, and bear in mind, Bill, I had heard this through my uncles, right? No one had ever. My dad finally had told me this story a few years ago, right? Some details. I think they really had it was a really sore spot, right? So she had spent all this money, right? Then she embezzled a bunch of money from this company she was working with because she was the accountant. They had caught her, fired her, and charged her. We're going to charge her with fraud. So my dad, after she had stole all this money, went to, because they've known each other. They've known each other for 25 years. We've gone to their house for dinner, for Christmas dinner and stuff like that. So I knew who these people were. And my dad's like, "Listen, if I pay that money back, will you drop the charges?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'll drop the charges." My dad fucking paid the money back so she didn't have to get charged with the crime. Right. After she had just ruined him, right? So they got a divorce, and she went on her way, and at that point I was living, at my dad's house during the week, going to school, and then going to my mom's house on the fucking weekends, you know what I mean? And just twisted right the fuck up, you know what I mean? And I never, and then, that's really when, I look back on this, and there's some revelations in my life, right? I had someone ask me, "When did you start using drugs?" Oh, fuck, right about the time this shit started happening, right? Oh, okay. Because, and I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I'm fucking, didn't really know who I am. I don't have fucking very many friends. I'm getting twisted and pulled between fucking family members. Drugs seems like, it makes me feel good, right?
So when you were bouncing around between the houses, did your mom or your dad ever bring up like negativity about the other parent at all?
I have to say that they never did. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
My dad's, like I say, my dad's a pretty conservative guy, and he doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve, right? He'll hold it in. He never said anything bad about my mom. He never trashed her.
Yeah.
Neither did my mom to him. You know what I mean? And God bless, that's the kind of people they were.
That's awesome.
Right.
And in large part for the safety and the well-being of their kids, I'm sure, right? Like they at least had enough wherewithal to not slam each other. And your dad easily could have, and I'm sure your mom easily could have, but they chose not to, which is very commendable. But what I guess I want to point out about that is because everything is energy and you're a child, and children they're pretty pure. Like we're like antennas as children, and we pick up on things, right? And so even though you might not consciously know certain things, I'm sure that your unconscious was picking up like some really bad vibes and some real negativity. And, it's affecting you probably in ways that you didn't really even understand, right? And because as you're telling the story, by what you're telling and what you've seen, you haven't really seen anything disruptive. Yeah, they split up and they got a divorce, but you didn't really see any evidence of it. And now you're just kind of moving from house to house. But all through that whole process and all of these hidden things that have been happening, you probably were feeling and taking energy and blah, blah, blah. And then you get to this point where, you start doing drugs, right? How old were you when you started doing drugs?
Oh, I think I was in grade 7 or 8 when I started smoke. I started smoke my first joint, I think. You mean? But I started doing cocaine when I was like 15 years old. That's when I started, right?
Mm.
Um, you know, I think a big part of that, I mean, I'll never blame my problems on my past, right? Um, but that the resentment that grew through that situation was terrifying, right?
You mean the resentment that grew from them not being honest with you?
100 fucking percent. Like I wanted a part of me over my entire life. Like I wanted the fucking truth from them, not from my fucking aunt and uncle, not from another aunt and uncle, not from parts from my brother, right? I wanted them. I wanted my mom to be like, listen, I stole all that fucking money. I spent it off. I got fired from the job from fucking ripping my boss off, right? That's why we split up. That's all I wanted, right? I've never gotten that to this day. Have I accepted the fact that my mom was probably a very sick woman back then?
Mm.
100%. Do I relate to that today? 110%. Do I crucify her for what her past? Not anymore.
Fuck yeah, dude. I want to share something. So I had my own serious resentments growing up and into my teens and adult years. And, my mom wasn't around and blah, blah, blah. And she dated alcoholics and, they weren't very nice to her. I remember seeing her with, she's beaten up quite often, especially by this one guy. Anyway, a few years ago when I started this podcast and I got my YouTube channel going and stuff, and my mom was curious, so she jumped on the YouTube channel and listened to some of the talks that I've done. And I remember sitting with her outside on her deck, and I'm going back about 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And I asked her, has she seen anything that I've been doing? And she's like, yeah. And she said, I'm not really happy about it. You're telling a whole bunch of stuff that I don't really like to be aired. And I looked at my mom right in the eyes and I said, Mom, that was my life. That was my life. I'm allowed to share my life. These are my experiences. And then we got into a really good deep chat out of that, and she was crying and I was tearing up, and it was pretty unreal. It was definitely something that opened up a new door for us. And then the next time I saw her, I asked her if she would spend time with me and tell me the whole story of any questions I had from my childhood. And she said she needed to think about it. She took about a month and she thought about it, and she said, yeah. And then so one day I picked her up and we drove out to the mountains out by Canmore somewhere, and we parked, and I asked her question after question after question of my childhood. She answered every single question I asked her. And it just cleared so much out of the way for me because my mind was making shit up and I didn't know a lot of the answers of a lot of things. And since that conversation, I've forgotten a lot of them.
Yeah.
But in the same breath, like, is there a chance that your mom might listen to this?
I don't think so. I would ask her, like, here's the thing is I don't want to ambush her with something like this, right? Do I still want her to tell me these things? I think a part of me does, right? But like the relationship, I actually went last year. When was it this year? I think it was this year. This year, like I made a trip down to the island to make the amends. There's some real fucking amends, right? They're not this fucking around like fucking, like, oh, we're happy that you're sober, Regan. Like I want to sit and stare these people in their eyes, right? And so I took my mom out for lunch, right? And it was like I got to sit down and just take responsibility for how I treated her over the years. It wasn't about what she had done or had not done, so to speak, right? I was like, I want to take responsibility for treating you like a piece of shit over the years, right? I used you. All I did, like I took advantage of that, right? That being, and I think both my parents both said the same thing, right? They felt responsible for the way that I turned out, right? And that's why, the money flowed, right? Whenever I asked for it, right? Because they felt guilty
Mm-hmm.
about what happened, right? Until the guilt turned into resentment, and then the boundaries went up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how most of that's how for me it went. But like I'm sure that some of your listeners out there can relate to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so kind of backtracking back to you. You're smoking weed in about grade 7. Your parents are now divorced. There's a whole bunch of things that have been going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. You find out about part of it through a friend from school, and you start smoking weed, and you kind of navigate through those junior high school years, and your drug use is progressing. I'm sure you started picking up the odd drink and take us from there into your teenage years.
Oh, 100%. I started drinking before I ever picked up a joint, right? I like to say that my dad was an alcoholic growing up, you know what I mean? But like I look back on it now, he's probably just a moderate drinker, you know what I mean? And I remember there's always a part of my story I like to touch on is that, when I thought my dad was an alcoholic, I remember this was when my parents were still together. I remember my mom coming to pick me one day. She's like, "Oh, your dad, he got in an accident. He got in an accident." Long story short, he left the bar and rear-ended someone and got arrested and got charged with drinking and driving, right? And he got off in the charge or whatever. That's minor details, right? But what the big part of this is like he never touched another drop of alcohol in his entire life up to this point. And I remember, fuck, what was it? It was when I was in my mid-20s, late 20s or something like that. I finally asked him, like, "Dad, why the fuck did you quit drinking back then?" He looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Regan, it just wasn't fucking fun anymore." And I was like, it still hits me here. I get fucking goosebumps just saying that. Right. And I'm like, fuck yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do when I'm not having fun anymore. And little did I know that I wasn't able to do that because I'm an alcoholic, right? And I drank, I drank to fit in, right? That's what my friends were doing. All these fucking stories that come back to me, I used to hear these people, and like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I used to hear these people in meetings, and everyone's story, all the consistencies. I wanted to not be those, right? I wanted to be this unique guy that didn't drink because he didn't fit in, right? I was always under this premise, like I'm like, some people just become addicted to drugs because they're addicting, right? I don't believe that today, but that the alcohol turned into weed, and the weed turned into drinking and acid and mushrooms, and then I was introduced to cocaine, and and that kind of got carried away in my later teens, you know what I mean? And at that point, I kind of followed in my brother's footsteps. He went to school in Vancouver and into trade school, so I followed his footsteps, and I did that, and I moved to Vancouver when I was 21 years old, and I kind of left my old friends behind, and I traveled back and forth sometimes when I had some free time and went partied and whatever. But I was like focused on going to school and kind of getting that done because I had paid a lot, I had taken out loans to get this kind of stuff done. And I was pretty responsible. I didn't burn my, I was one of those things in my early 20s that I was one of the, probably one of my greatest achievements is getting into the trades and getting a red seal and being a journeyman millwright. But I mean, like I caught up with myself again, so to speak. I mean, I found the people that partied, and when I started doing that, and you know, I went to school and I did that, and I started working, and and I was pretty manageable for fucking a lot of years. You know what I mean? I would party on the weekends. I wouldn't really let it interfere with work that much, and like there's a couple times in my early 20s that I remember going to work fucked up, and and not getting enough sleep, and right. But like I always made it to work, and I always paid my bills. I always fucking had a car. I always paid my insurance. I always paid my cell phone bill. All the things I wasn't able to do later on in life. You know what I mean? And and I ended up meeting a lovely woman and getting married in my mid-20s. I don't even know if you know that, Bill. You
No,
probably
I
know,
don't. I didn't.
right? Well, let me tell you about it. Well, I met this lovely woman at a nightclub in Vancouver, and and we hit it off. We hit it off, I think. You know what I mean? And we ended up moving in with each other fairly quickly. She was from a different nationality, and one of her parts of her nationality was very forbidden to live together when we're not married. So, fast forward to 2 years, we were dated for 2 years, got married. We're married for 2 years, and then I moved to Calgary in that time, right? And
With her?
with her, right? With her, we bought a house out here in the Northwest, or she bought a house. I should say she bought a fucking house. I didn't put any fucking money in. You know what I mean? I was just there. It was just along for the ride. You mean? She didn't like the fact that she knew I did cocaine and wasn't a big fan of that, but she never really forced the issue. And we moved to Calgary, and I kind of cleaned up my act, so to speak. I mean, I remember not doing hard drugs for about a year. You know what I mean? But I drank, and I would get blackout drunk, Bill, and I would do some fucking stupid shit, dude. Like stuff that I would have divorced me for at that point, right? So I was like, well, I can't drink and not do the drugs because, like, look how I act, right? So I'll bring the drugs back in. I'll bring the drugs back in so I can drink and not look like a fucking idiot, right? And then I started to be unhappy. And I don't know why. I don't know if I was unhappy, but, I cheated on her and did all sorts of fucking loser shit, you know what I mean? And it was like, I look back on it now and it's just like, I just wasn't done partying. You know what I mean? I wasn't done womanizing, because that's a big part of my story, right? That's a big part of my story over the years. And I wasn't done with that. You know what I mean? And I remember the day coming. It's like, I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this marriage. Even like the day I was getting married, my best man, I was like, we're in this hotel room, and I'm like, dude, if this doesn't work out, I'm gonna get divorced. He's like, you can't be thinking of that shit at your fucking wedding day, dude. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. But I'm gonna go through this. Like, all these people are here. I gotta kind of like go through this, right? You know what I mean? And my drug use caught up with me again. You know what I mean? I was, I remember, just hiding it from her and staying up for days and doing all the fucking shit coke addicts do. You know what I mean? Watching porn and fucking hookers and all this shit. You know what I mean? It was just like, just chaos. You know what I mean? And finally I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, we're getting divorced. I'm leaving. Right? Because like, you're interfering. She was interfering with the relationship I had with drugs.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, okay, well, obviously she has to go because the drugs are staying. Right? So I was like, okay, you know what? You take the house. I'm taking the car.
You take the house that you paid for.
You take the house you pay for. I don't want any equity out of it, okay? I'm not that selfish, Bill. You take the house, I take the car. This is how fucking stupid I am, okay? So I pack up all my shit. I fucking rent a place 3 blocks away. What was I thinking? You know what I mean? Like how, like when I use drugs, I get very, 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 very sketchy, okay? Like most cocaine addicts do after a period of time. I mean, at what point did I think it was a good idea to move 3 blocks away from the wife that I used to have and to think she's not going to come bang on the fucking door, right? So talk about living in fear. I was terrified. I was terrified when I used drugs in that fucking house, dude. Who's coming? I know she's coming, right? When was the terrifying thing, right? Yeah. And then not having to answer the door when my vehicle's parked out front. She knows I'm home, right? So, long story short, it was a pretty easy divorce. You know what I mean? Like, she took all the stuff. I didn't really give a fuck because I was high all the time, right? The fucking papers came in the mail because she filed for divorce. I signed them, sent them back. That was over. But, like, that's when things really took a turn, right? I didn't know how much I needed someone to tell me no, right? Regan on his own free will, without a little leash here or there, is absolute chaos, right? That's when I started staying up for days at a time. That's when I started spending more money than I wanted to spend, right? That's when I started missing work, right? These are the things, that's when I started hanging out with drug dealers. That's when I started, thought that was cool to like hang out with these guys. You know what I mean? That's when, I thought it was a good idea, because I was working out of town at the time. So when I come back from my days off, I'd sell drugs And I'm going to tell you right now, I was the worst fucking drug dealer you ever met in your life. Okay. I'm a drug doer, not a drug seller, Bill. You know, don't give me, like, if there's drugs, I'm going to do them all. Right. No matter what I tell myself, no matter whose drugs they are. Right.
What the consequences
are going to be
of doing somebody else's drugs.
Right. But like, and that, like I was this, like I always looked down on people that that smoked crack or did meth or heroin or any of these other fucking stupid drugs, right?
Me too.
And I was like, I fucking just grabbed I just grabbed this powder stuff and I fucking ripped that, man. Look at these losers smoking a pipe, right? Little did I know, that crack is awesome, right? Or so I thought. And I was never a big crack guy. I mean, like, I look back on this now, like, how many times I told myself, I'm sure you can agree with this, is that I'm never doing that. I'm never sticking that pipe in my mouth. I'm never cooking up a crack rock. I'm never going to fucking, like sell my shit. I'm never going to steal from people. I'm never going to fucking rob people, right? I'm never not going to pay my rent, right? I'm never going to use at work, just like the book tells us, right? That I look back on this now.
So I want to interject here. Yeah. So I had actually quit drinking when I was 22 years old. I never had a drink ever since then. I turned into a workaholic and my ego wanted status and money and blah, blah, blah. And, I did a lot of shady things while I was married too. And then I get to this point where I'm looking for my brother in Winnipeg and I had to go in a crack house. I had to smoke some dope, some crack. Yeah. And I share the story in my story. I'm like, I fucking hated hard drugs. I always looked down on druggies and crackheads and fucking junkies. I always looked down on them. I thought an alcoholic was actually kind of superior to them. And then I had those couple hits of crack in that crack house because they wanted me to prove I wasn't a narc. It set off the phenomenon of craving in my body, and I came back to Calgary, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I ended up finding it, and that's what burnt my life. I went on a 6-year spree and fucking destroyed my life. So very similar to you, I fucking wanted nothing to do with that. But I will tell you the first time I did it, and hopefully no one does this to fucking get this feeling on the air, is it launched me into the fourth dimension. It fucking was a spiritual experience. It was like fucking everything I ever looked for. But that was the same thing as alcohol and dope when I was young. It's the same thing as fucking getting $100,000 check. Like, but this shit, that first time I did crack it, I was pretty much hooked instantly.
Right. And it's like, it doesn't matter what it is. It's like, like what I've learned is, like I need relief. I need relief from the disease, right?
Yeah.
Whatever gives me relief, I'm going to overdo.
Yeah.
Right. If it's drugs, if it's women, if it's money, if it's fucking buying clothes or, like sex or whatever it is, like I can, like even anger, even resentment, fucking like even stewing in my head, I can get relief out of that.
Yeah.
Right. There's a snowball. I was talking I was working with a guy before I came here, and he's talking about this resentment he has about this guy that did fucking absolutely nothing to him. And I'm like, and I've been there. I know like how the ball gets rolling. And I'm like, by the end of it, I fucking hated this guy. I don't even know who this fucking guy is, right? But like, I understand that, like it just the thought pattern it just gets of resentment and anger is just like it can get out of control. I mean, I sit there. Even I've had experiences where I sit there and I'm like sitting there having a smoke, and I'm like after that, I'm like the whole fucking time I'm smoking here, I've been fucking like stewing in this thing. Right. And I actually have to, ask God to relieve me of the fucking anger. Right. And it's crazy how like how aware I am of these things today. Mm-hmm. Right. But being aware is just not enough some days. Right.
No,
right?
There's more.
There's much more. To touch base back on my drug use had carried on. Like I was never going to do the other stuff, right? Never going to do the other stuff until I ran out of the stuff I had, right? And it's like, I carried on, and I held down a job for most of my life, right? Until like my late 30s and right. But I was always a worker. That was one thing that my parents had instilled in me. And if, I'm forever grateful that they instilled the work ethic in me, right? I've always had this work ethic that drives me. And it's like, and I got that, I think, and I've shared this with other people, is that work ethic is not something that it's something that you gain through experience in life, right? I think it's something that you're raised with. It's not something that I can gain later, right? And I mean, and the drive and determination, when it comes to my employment is pretty good, right? But like, like drugs interrupted that, you know. I became this guy that no one could rely on, right? And every time I got, like, it got to a point where, like, if I contacted anyone, they knew I needed money for something, right? Oh man, can you help me out with with $100 so I can catch the bus, so I can get to Calgary, so I can catch this plane to work, and all this kind of stuff. Like, I look back on those, like the 10 years of life that like when things got really bad, like how exhausting it must have been. Like, I was exhausted. I can imagine it was for other people, right? But obviously, I've always was drawn to people that were doing the same things as me, right? I was always into the younger crowd, right? Even as I got older, I still had the same friends that were much younger than me, right? I don't know why that is today. Maybe just to like keep living in that mentality of a early or mid 20s person, right? I always dated younger. I always had those people around. You mean I finally have a point in my life where I have friends my own age. And that's very out of character for the way I've lived my entire life, right? And we look at like the disease of alcoholism, the progressive, chronic, progressive, and fatal. Okay, the progressive part, it's pretty easy to see once you're out of the active addiction part, right? And got some time in, right? I think in early recovery, I couldn't really see. I could see the progression in a snapshot, okay, but like I'm coming on, I just took a big milestone. I got 3 years and a few months now, but like, like I look back in the picture in the entirety of my life. Okay. From the day that I picked up my dad's beer in the fridge to the end when I can't get enough heroin in my body to do anything anymore. Right. And it's like, well, it's pretty easy to see the progression now that I'm sober and in recovery and live this life and I get to share it with other people that are struggling. And it's like, man, like, that's a long road. That's like 20, like from 15 to 40 is 25 years, right? It took me 25 years to end up on heroin, right?
So let's kind of fast forward and jump up to, you got divorced, blah, blah, blah. That's all good. Your fucking illness progressed and it started taking you fucking right down at the knees. And, maybe a little bit before I first met you, I met you in the rooms of recovery and you came in and fucking figured it was something that it wasn't. And you fucked around and you found out and then you almost died and blah, blah, blah. But let's kind of go right a little bit before you came in. What were you doing? Where were you and where did it take you? And then how did you find recovery?
Sure. So I really gave recovery a shot in August of 2018. Okay. And leading up to this little, we'll say, sobriety bit, we're going to call it sobriety. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But you mean like my life my drug use had progressed from powder cocaine to meth to fentanyl. Okay. And, as an opiate abuser, I don't think any opiate abuser who gets into it really knows where it's going to take them. I think it's, like, it's one of those drugs where you don't understand how powerful it is. right? And most, hard drugs are powerful, okay? I think anyone has their experience. I mean, like, I remember when I started using opiates, how someone was like, you better watch out. That's a different beast. And I was like, fuck you, right? I've been doing drugs my entire life, you know? Um, and man, that shit cut me off at the knees in 4 years, right? And it's like, it was, July of 2018. I was homeless for my first time in Fort McMurray because I'd fucking moved everywhere to get away from what was going on, right? Everywhere. I think I moved like 6 times in like a year and a half, right? All over the place. So July hits, I'm in Fort Mac and fucking I just overdosed for my first time. And the people I was living with were like, you got to get the fuck out of here, man. We can't have this shit going on here. And I was like, yeah, whatever, man. You guys are smoking crack in here and doing whatever. And they held their ground. And they held their ground. They kicked me out and they sent me to this little fucking it's like a homeless center. It was like a flop. It was like one of those places where it had mattresses. Right? They sent me there and they're like, yeah, well, see you later. So I spent a couple days homeless there and someone had finally bought me a bus ticket. Someone bought me a bus ticket because we were talking about bus tickets. The guy's like, I'll get you out of Fort Mac, man. I'll come down and get your Greyhound ticket and you get you to your aunt and uncle's house in Kamloops and you can figure your shit out. So my aunt and uncle said, you can come down there. Went down there. I was, I kind of detoxed there and I got a job because that was always what saved me, Bill. I always had a career that I could go bust my ass and make a shit ton of money and at least bail myself out of that mess, right? So I get this job. I go back to Fort Mac. I'm living in camp. And long story short, I get fired from this job for shocker, Bill. I know, getting high on the job. And I went back. I went back to Trail. I went back to Trail, BC. And I remember this is a story. This is part of my story I always tell. Okay, I get fired from this job, and like they booked me a plane ticket for the next day, and I wake up and I swore up and down I'm not getting high anymore. I'm like, man, I just lost a job. I have a shit ton of money in the bank because I just worked this job for like 50 days straight. But I just got fired, so I can't do any more drugs. It's really fucking got fired. I remember the whole plane ride back to Calgary because I had bought this car. I was working, I had bought this car and I was going to pick it up when I was done this job. Pick it up a little earlier now because I got fired. Right. But I remember the whole plane ride. I'm like, I'm not, I'm done with this life, but I'm not getting high anymore. Not getting high anymore, man. I can't do it. I land in Calgary, grab the car, right? Grab this, shocker. I know it's a BMW, Bill. Would you like those?
Go figure.
Right? Go figure. I picked this car up.
It's black one?
No, it was actually dark silver.
Okay.
It's actually dark silver. We'll get to the black one later. I remember getting the car, get the insurance, and hop in the car. I'm driving back to the place where this opiate thing all started for me. And I'm like, I'm not getting high. I'm like, I'm on the phone. I'm looking for places to live. I'm driving, listening to music. I feel pretty good. You know what I mean? And, a couple hours in the drive, still not using. I'm going to
Not a cloud in the horizon?
No, I'm not getting high. I can tell you that much. Okay. Third hour, not getting high. You know what I mean? Like they're making plans with friends to go for dinner when I get there. I can't remember if it was like the 4th or 5th hour because it was like a 6-hour drive from Calgary to Trail. I couldn't even remember the thought process, Bill. All I remember today was being on the phone with the drug dealer going, you know what? I'm heading to town right now. If you start driving towards me, even though you're not going that way, we'll meet. I'll get that faster, right? So at first stop, he didn't come meet me. Of course, he fucking told me I was fucking crazy. Just come see me when you get there. So I get there and man, I remember having $40,000 in the bank. I just paid $10,000 for this car. I picked up a bag of dope. Long story short, in 8 weeks, I managed to spend $40,000 in cash. My buddy let me live with him, or was going to rent a room off him. Paid him 1 month's rent. Couldn't pay the next month's rent. Ripped him off for a whole bunch of weed because he grew weed. Traded that for heroin. He found out, kicked me out. I sold the car that I just paid $10,000 for 6 weeks before for fucking $1,600. And now I'm homeless on the street in fucking small town BC in a matter of 8 weeks. How did this happen again? Is what I'm telling myself. How did this happen again? You know what I mean? But I went to treatment in 2010 in Calgary
Yeah.
at one of the treatment centers in here, right? And and things are really falling apart, right? Things like I'm living in this guy's house with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I have 60. The reason I sold the car is like how my thought pattern is, how fucking shitty my thinking was. I'm like, I need the money for treatment. I need the money for treatment. I don't know how much treatment costs, Bill. It could have cost $10 or it could have cost 10,000. I wouldn't have known. I didn't even call and ask. I just know I needed the money for treatment. Little did I know. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I needed the money for, right? I need an excuse to sell the car to buy more drugs or whatever the fucking case is, right? So I call this treatment center. I'm like, yeah, I need to come. Like, my life's shit. I need to come. I need to come there. They're like, yeah, come in for an interview.
2018.
2018. This is August 2018. Come in for an interview. So I'm like, okay, I can make it there in like 3 days. I got to catch the bus now because I got no car. I have some money to buy the bus ticket, so I bought the bus ticket. But I'm like, fuck you. I mean, like, what if the bus breaks down, Bill? What if the bus breaks down? I don't want to go. I don't want to be dope sick if the bus breaks down. So I'll get a bunch of dope and right. So boom, there goes $1,000. Hop on the bus. The dope's gone in like 2 hours, dude. The bus never breaks down, of course. So I arrive in Calgary, and I got 24 hours before this interview. I'm not even accepted in this treatment. I got an interview at this treatment center, and I got $800 in my fucking pocket. 24 hours to kill. Well, I can get a little bit more high, I guess, right? You want to guess how much money I made at that treatment center with, Bill?
0.
$40. And the only reason I have $40 is I couldn't find a fucking dope dealer to sell me dope from the walk downtown to this treatment center. So I walk into this treatment center. I walk down the stairs because I've been there before. I kind of knew the layout of the land, so to speak. I kind of, like, I'm not accepting this place. I have a hockey bag full of clothes. I'm fucking throwing tinfoil and pipes out my pocket when I'm walking up to this place, right? I have 3 shirts and a pair of pants and a pair of shoes. And I still have my cell phone at this point. I always needed a phone, but I'm dying. I'm fucking dying of alcoholism, not knowing it, right? I gotta get my life straight, man. I get my life straight. So I walk into this treatment center, walk down the stairs, sit on the couch, and like sitting there, like they finally brought me in the office, and I must have looked like goddamn death. You mean? And like I go into the office, and there's like a chair and a desk, and I'm sitting in front of this desk and a chair, and the guy's like, "So Regan, like we took you like an extra couple days to get here." And I'm like, yeah. Like, so like what happened? What's been going on in your life? Like what's going on? And no shitting you, I think I made it like fucking like 15 seconds into this conversation, and I just broke down, man. I've never cried like that my entire life. I look back on that time, and and at that point my life's over. Right? My parents want nothing to do with me anymore. Right? My brother wants nothing to do with me. No, I have no friends. I've ripped them all off or fucked them over somehow, right? I have no one. I am fucking bankrupt. As the book tells me, spiritually, emotionally, financially, all of the above check boxes were checked off, right? So, I managed to like get this story out of like how everything turned to opiate. We turned, things that had progressed to this new level that, it brought me to the point of self-destruction. And this guy, this counselor, this treatment center, he sat there and he just listened with his arms crossed, and I'm crying, and I'm fucking like sobbing, and like all he's sitting there, he didn't say an entire word the entire time I did this. I got 10 minutes to get started, of course, because like fucking taking breaks because I can't stop crying. He's like, the only did was have me fucking Kleenex, you mean? Like I thought it was some special case. They never heard this shit before. It's like, and at the end of that conversation, he only said one thing to me. And I always tell this when I'm telling my story. He's like, Regan, he's like, you know what you should do is you should probably remember this moment right now. And I get goosebumps saying that. You mean? And it's like, and I'll tie this all in together with my sponsorship and stuff like that. You mean? But at that moment, I think it was the most desperate I've ever been in my entire life. And I think that anyone who listens to this podcast knows what I'm fucking talking about. That fucking hopeless, defeating point of your life where you're like, something's got to give. And that was mine.
The hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. Heavy drinkers who live this life will know what we're talking about, something like that.
Right. You know what I mean? If you felt those feelings, if you felt the way that I felt when I told that story, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. Right? Life is over. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get better. I don't know if life is ever going to be different.
Yeah.
Right? And my recovery journey started at that moment. Right? I kicked heroin in that fucking treatment center, cold turkey. You know what I mean? I was grateful to have a bed. You know, they never, you know, they at the end of that conversation, you know, like he's like, usually Regan, like we don't usually do this, but we're gonna give you a bed right now, because I don't think he's like, we don't think you have much time left. And I'm forever grateful. I just saw one of these counselors at a meeting I was at before I came to this meeting today. He was a counselor when I was in there, and you know, and they're like, I detoxed there, and I spent an entire year at that treatment center. I did all the phases, the phaser things they, you know, like these treatment centers do, because I've been to a few of them now. You know what I mean? Because I remember committing, I'm staying a year. I got to stay a year. I got to get my fucking life back on track, right? You know, and we talked about before that we started this podcast about what I need to recover from, right? And I think a lot of fucking people in early recovery just don't fucking get that, dude, right?
Well, why do you think they don't? I have my opinions.
Okay.
I think primarily because the message within most rooms, 12-step rooms, is actually a diluted message, and the truth isn't really spoken about of really what we're trying to recover from. A lot of people will come and think it's about a substance, and everyone in these rooms and in these groups, they pat the person on the ass and say, fuck, right on. You're here. You got a year. Good. You're on your way. And where are they on their way to? They're on their way to a fucking relapse.
100%, bro.
Because the rooms are watered down with opinions and theories, and it's about a drink.
Right.
It's really not about a drink.
Right. And exactly. I mean, and I think that you know, at that time of my life, like heroin was the problem. If I just stopped doing that, life will get better. And realistically, it did get better. Yeah. Right? I have some money in the bank. I'm fucking looking good. I'm putting on some weight. I'm feeling better. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that I tell my sponsees today. Okay? Especially guys that are in treatment centers. Okay? You know, like when I hear that, you know, like, fuck man, like life's really getting better. I got my bank account. I'm like, oh, cool. You got a fucking bank account, eh? Right? And it's like, these people, you know, like, it looks like their life is getting better. Like I look at their life and if superficially it looks like it's getting better, and they think it's getting better because they've banked a few fucking Alberta Works checks, right? They've got some meals in their treatment center. They got some decent sleep over the last 2 weeks, right? But in my opinion, you've done nothing to prevent this from happening again, right? And that's what happened to me. I surrounded myself. I was a product of my environment in these treatment centers, right? I had some accountability for a drug test, right? I was going to these meetings. I was, you know, I did a few good things in early recovery, okay?
And that's when I first met you, was right in around then.
Right. You mean, and I did get a sponsor at one point, I think. And then I think you sponsored me for a little bit and took me through later, right? But that was in that before I relapsed. That was in that year, that 15, 13 months or whatever I stayed sober, you mean? But like I had bigger and better plans. Regan knew what was going on, you mean? You know? And it was like, you know, I got a home group. You know what I mean? That was great. You know, one thing I'm super grateful for that I really did was connect with people outside of a treatment center. Yeah. Right? I think that's what another failure that I see people doing, right? They're so, oh my God, my fucking brotherhood at this fucking treatment center. But 90% of you fucking guys are going to relapse, right? So where do I want to stay? Where do I want to put my roots? Well, I want to put my roots in these couple meetings that I found where I fucking find people that have fucking 3, 4, 5, 6 years of recovery, right? They're going to be there, right? And they were there throughout my that sobriety. I'm going to call it sobriety because we talk about recovery being different. I can probably think that you're going to agree with this, is that, sobriety, I kind of want to kill myself because I'm still suffering from the fucking sickness or the spiritual illness. But in recovery, I don't suffer from that, right? So, like I got a home group and I met some people that, that have some real recovery, right? Was I really at that point to believe what the book was telling me? Not, absolutely not, right?
Thank you for tuning in to the Udrcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at Billwardlife to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.